Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us in this Study in the USA webinar. My name is Basha. I'm one of the education advisors here at Education USA and the US-UK Fulbright Commission. So today we will be covering things about studying in the USA and talk a little bit about the choosing, funding, and applying for US universities. We will also take questions at the end, which you could actually pop into the Q&A box as we go along with the webinar. And just, you could take some notes, but just so you're aware, this is being recorded and we will send out the recording to you sometime this week. So let's get started. So what is Education USA? Education USA advisors are an advisory service that is part of the Education USA network, which is a US Department of State networks of over 400 international student advising centers throughout the world. And we help international students with information on how to study in the US and how to figure out how to go about the whole process. So today I'll be talking about studying for an undergraduate degree and the reasons why you might want to do that, how to think about the universities in the US and how to choose them and that process. And we'll also be talking about funding US education and the application process. So we are based at Education USA and our center is based at the US-UK Fulbright Commission here in London. And the Commission and Education USA are paired up in order to help people explore education in the US. And also at the graduate level is to provide awards to graduate students to go to the US to complete their postgraduate education. Our aim as Education USA advisors is to offer completely free and unbiased advice to help UK students study in the US. So if your dream is to study in the US, we are here to help you with that process. So why study in the US? What makes it so much different than studying here in the UK? Well, there's a variety of different reasons, but the reputation and variety of US universities is one of the top reasons for studying there. There are over 4,500 US universities that offer undergraduate degrees. So that's compared to about 120 here in the UK. So within that 4,500 universities, there's going to be a huge range of different personality and styles of universities that you could choose from. US universities are also known for their reputation. They have a full range of programs on offer and they produce groundbreaking research as well. So we'd advise focusing on something called FIT whilst you're going through that process, as this will allow you to find many high quality universities that you might have never heard of before. And we'll go through what we mean by FIT a bit later on in the slides. Studying in the US also gives you an opportunity to experience a different campus life and activities. So US universities are known for having very vibrant campus life, and they encourage students to be involved outside of the classroom. There's lots of different extracurricular activities that happen on campus, things such as music clubs, a cappella, dance, sports. And one university in Wisconsin has an extracurricular club for log rolling. So, you know, if you want to try something else, you'll probably find it at a US university. There's also a big focus on academic flexibility. So most universities in the US do something called the liberal arts, and they focus on teaching. Now, this is the top attraction for UK students, as they follow an educational idea of the liberal arts curriculum. So they look to make well-rounded or have well-rounded education and have well-rounded students. This liberal arts curriculum gives you the flexibility to explore different interests before selecting a major. And there's a big emphasis on teaching and an engaging classroom environment as well. You're also able to take a combination of different study topics such as engineering and art, or art and history, or even something like engineering and sport if you wish to. There are many students who go to the US with a focus on one degree. So for example, something like biomedical engineering, but then they take a class in a different subject and they decide to switch to that subject. So you have this opportunity to actually explore your interest before selecting a major, unlike here in the UK where you have to apply for a specific major. There's also a lot of funding opportunities in the US. Now, this might be surprising to some of you, but this is another top reason to study in the US. So we will discuss the funding opportunities later on. But just so you are aware, there are many opportunities to find a variety of scholarships in the US as compared to here in the UK where we have the loan-based program system. It also gives you an opportunity to internationalize your CV. So studying abroad is very appealing to employers nowadays, as it shows boldness to do something different. It shows that you have great interpersonal skills, and it also shows that you have experience in cross-cultural communication. It also gives you a way to build networks of friends and professional contacts around the world. So US, once again, is a bit of a mix of students and professors from different parts of the world as well. And you have an opportunity to take up student jobs. Whilst in the US, you could actually work up to 20 hours a week during term time and 40 hours a week during holidays. You also get a chance to work up to a year after graduating as well. So it gives you a chance to kind of boost up your CV. And studying in the US will give you an opportunity to learn about a new culture. So the US spans across 6 different time zones, and it has a great diversity in both geography and cultures. You have long summers and long summer holidays to explore the US and those different, the different cultures and geography. And living on campus also helps you get to know the US culture. You'll be among many different students from all over the US, not just from the state that the university is in. So students from all over US go to different universities as well. So what are some of the key differences of studying in the US? Well, typically the bachelor's or undergraduate programs are longer. In the US, it takes 4 years to receive a bachelor's degree, as opposed to the 3 years here in the UK. And that's because of that liberal arts system where it gives you a chance to explore what you would like to do in your bachelor's degree. Also, the admission is to the university as a whole. So you do not apply to a particular academic department. And once again, this reflects the liberal arts system. Where you don't have to choose your major until later, as compared to here in the UK, where you have to apply for a very specific course at a certain university. There's also a lot less government control. So institutions have more diversity and freedom to do what they want to. And there's also no set fees or centralized admissions process. So universities are allowed to set their own fees and they can set their admission process as well. There's no one governing that. The application process is also slightly longer and a little bit more in depth, but that's because the admission process is more holistic. So they look at more than just your grades. They want to find out who you are as a person, and they look at different aspects of that, which we'll go into later on. You also apply for funding alongside the application process, not after you're admitted to the university. So this is something to keep in mind whilst we're going through this webinar. And there are a few exceptions in the US. Both law and medicine are actually studied at postgraduate level. So you can't study law or medicine in the undergraduate. It's only done at the postgraduate level in the US. So what are some terminology difference as you start your research and applying to US universities? So a US high school corresponds to year 9 through 12 in the UK in a secondary school, or year 10 to 13 in England and Wales. So the US high school, which are years 9 to 12, correspond to the secondary school years 10 to 13 in England and Wales, 11 to 14 in Northern Ireland, and S3 to S6 in Scotland. US use terms like college, university, school, or institution. So these all mean university. Just because you hear someone or something, a school is called a college, it doesn't mean you will get a lesser qualification. Most students and people in the US use the term college for a university. And you will have various classes or courses, and this is equivalent to UK modules at university. You will also hear about your degree program or major, and this is equivalent to a UK course, basically. So this is helpful to know as you start your research into the programs and the schools you'll be applying to. So what is the timeline for applying to US universities? So we recommend beginning your research process about 12 to 18 months before enrollment. So that's typically at the end of year 12. You will then register for any required admission exams and aim to take those in the summer after year 12. Now, keep in mind that a lot of universities, admission exams are not needed. So it's worth keeping a note of which universities actually require those and which don't. We recommend that you then finalize a selection of where you will be applying to in early autumn of your year 13. So that's about 10 to 12 months before you plan to enroll. And we'll go through strategies of how to do this later on. Now, about 8 to 10 months, so this is your the autumn of your year 13, you will start putting together an application and you will submit that application according to the deadlines. So once again, I'd like to point out that different universities might have different deadlines for their application and for the submission of it. Now, the spring of year 13, so this is around 4 to 7 months before you enroll, you could expect to hear back from the universities you apply to with their admission decision. And based off where you choose to go and where you were accepted, you will notify those universities of your decision and apply for a visa. So this is typically 1 to 3 months before the enrollment. And there are plenty of resources on our website to help with your pre-departure, so including things like travel advice, living arrangements in the US, campus life, etc. And you will typically start your studies around mid-August to early September. So this is slightly earlier than here in the UK. In the UK, usually your first year of studies, you start in the second to last week in September, whereas in the US, you usually start mid-August or very early September. So how do you go about choosing a university? Choosing is a very important step in the process of applying to US universities, and this is something you want to spend some time on. So our top tip is actually to spend about 90% of your time in researching and choosing the university you will apply to, and about 10% of your time on actually applying to those universities. Now, it's very important to think through this step. And the key is to be flexible and be open-minded when you're going through this choosing process. Remember, there are over 4,500 universities in the US, so the choice is massive, and you might find it to be a daunting process to narrow down your prospects when you get started. But the goal is to research, find a great university that fits what you want out of it, and to start narrow down the list. And we'll go through some tips and points on how to do that as well. So it's important to kind of know the context of the US as you consider applying and researching to study in the US and choosing which institution you'd like to apply to. So just something to keep in mind, that there is no set national standard for universities in the US. Like I mentioned before, universities are free to choose their own sets of fees. They're free to structure their courses the way they want. They're free to form the student environment the way they want their university to look like and their campus life to be. And they could kind of make up the rules as they go. So compared to the UK, where the institutions have, very set fees, they have quite similar environments and quite similar fees on campus, the US institutions will vary drastically from university to university. So what this means is that there is so much variety and diversity of institutions in the US that everyone can find the perfect university that will, help with their fit and that would fit what they need out of their education as well. Now, you might think that this is very daunting, but it's actually a great thing to know that with so many universities and so many different types of universities, there will be a university that's a good fit for you. So be open-minded when you're doing your research and make sure you spend time getting to know each university, looking on their website, and also identifying what's important to you and if those universities meet that. I will also talk about funding a little bit later, but I just want to plug it in here. If funding is important to you, then this needs to be considered from step one of the choosing process. So if funding is important, make sure that you only apply to universities that offer financial aid to international students. We'll talk more about this a little bit later on, but make sure that you know this is very important already in this beginning step of researching the universities. A lot of the time we get students contact us saying, oh, Basha, I got into this university, but actually they didn't offer me financial aid because I didn't think about the funding, and now I have to find money to pay for it. Unfortunately, at that step, it's a bit too late. So it's very important, if funding is important to you, make sure you look at universities that offer that financial aid or scholarships to international students. And just one more note, that you could complete UCAS applications along US applications. You could do both. There's no implication on the UCAS website or forms or the US ones if you're applying to both, but just be mindful of the deadlines. You will have different deadlines for US universities, as I mentioned before. So I was talking about this fit. So what does it mean and how do you determine your fit? So this is the first step in your choosing process. It's locating the factors that are important to you for going to university. So we focus a lot on this term fit and on finding what school and program is going to be the best fit for you and your personal academic interests. So there might be many factors that you want to consider, both in and out of the classroom. For example, you might be looking at specific types of programs or departments that the university has, or maybe you want to live in a specific location, or maybe, as I mentioned before, funding is important to you. So the availability of funding for international students will be very important. Maybe something like the campus size will be important for your fit. Do you want to be at a big university where there's loads of people walking around and loads of students around the campus all the time? Or do you want to be somewhere smaller where the campus, is a bit smaller and people say hi to each other because they know each other from the campus? What's the academic environment you're looking for? Do you want to be at a university that's very rigorous or competitive? Or do you want somewhere that's very inclusive or very supportive? So when you're looking at those factors, these are some of the things you might want to consider. And it's important that you begin thinking about these factors and prioritize them as well. So maybe make a list of which factors are the most important to you. You know, is it the funding that's available, or is it actually the program they offer? Or maybe it's a particular sport that you want to be a part of, or you might be interested in watching, or particular course like engineering. It might be things like the weather. You want to live somewhere where it's cold and there's snow, so you might be able to go snowboarding on skiing during the winter. Then the East Coast might be the best fit for you. Or, you know, do you want sunshine all year long? And maybe don't consider living on the East Coast where they have really cold winters. You know, are you trying to save some money? Living in an urban place will be more expensive than in a rural place. So those are some of the factors to consider when you're looking for that fit. It's all about understanding yourself and what you want from that experience and what you need for your experience. So it's important to assess if the universities that you are researching match the things that you are looking for. And as I mentioned, make a list of the factors that are important to you, and maybe even rank them. If, you know, one outweighs the other one, maybe rank it higher. So we also, when you're looking to determine your fit, we also encourage to think beyond the rankings of US universities, but looking at the variety of factors. So rankings in the US are not the same as here in the UK. They work completely different. And I would even argue that they're not very useful when determining if a university is a good fit for you or not. So the ranking is really down to the methodology of how universities are ranked and formed. And they don't necessarily rank things like teaching or graduate prospects. And some universities are even asked to go on the ranking system. So just when you're looking through rankings, take them with a pinch of salt and focus on that fit instead. And make sure that you apply to universities that you really research and are really part of your fit. There's no point in applying somewhere where you're actually not going to enjoy going to and enjoy being there for 4 years of your studies. So now that you decided what factors are important to you, the next step is to use this information to begin to actually research universities. So unlike UCAS, you are actually not limited to 5 universities. In theory, you could apply to as many universities as you like. And there's an interesting story of a US student that applied to something like 300 universities this year. I'm not sure how he had the time to do it, but either way, he did it. So there is absolutely no limit. You could apply to as many as you like. However, with that in mind, keep in mind the time and financial aspects of applying to universities. We recommend applying to about 6 to 10 universities that meet your fit. And to jumpstart your process of choosing, you want to focus on narrowing those 4,500 institutions to a list of about 10 to 20 schools that you think could be a good fit for you. So you might think about, okay, Basha, how do I actually do this? Well, you could find resources on the choosing section of our undergraduate guide on our website. And it includes a list of links to search engines that actually help with this process of narrowing down your choices of universities. Now, I'm going to go through an example of how to do this and an example of one to show you what the process looks like. So this is one of the search engines that's linked on our website called Big Future College Search. And as you could see, there are a variety of filters that you could use, including type and size of school, location by state, the majors on offer, even things like campus life. And this is where you apply all those factors you were thinking when going through those factors for your fit. Now, it's important to note for funding consideration that within the affordability filter under financial need met section, you need to select the percentage of the need met to narrow down your list to schools that are going to offer aid. And make sure that you tick the box titled Aid for International Students, because this will narrow down your options as well. Now, you always want to check the information on the actual school's website, just in case, it might not be updated or things might have changed recently. Now, without any filters, there are over 3,600 universities listed on this search. So if we apply some filters, what we have put in the filters to narrow down our list of schools. So we put that we wanted to attend a four-year school with less than 9,000 students in the state of Ohio that will meet 100% of financial need for international students. And as you could see, it brought that number from 3,600 to only 4 universities. Now, this is a much more manageable number to actually research. So you could then go into each university's website and see if they meet those factors for your fit, and see if you could narrow down to even less universities from that list. And you could do that search again and again and again to look for different factors. You might want to pick different locations as well, or maybe different campus lifestyles, etc. So you could then go into each university's profile to find information such as application deadlines, links to their website, what the graduation rate is, the average SAT scores if required, and other information about the university. You could also click on options to the left to get more information, and there's also a link to their website as well on this page. So here we have an example of actually going into Denison's website. And this is a page for international applicants in the apply section of their website. And as you could see, it says Denison prides itself on offering a culturally diverse environment for its students. So international students comprise 16% of our student body, which is quite a lot. Our strong academic reputation attracts talented students from nearly all US states and more than 50 countries. So our students interact with people of many different faiths and cultural backgrounds. So if some of those things are a part of your fit, you could see on their website what kind of student body they actually are made up of. And also on the bottom, it says that they have a commitment to providing equal access to phenomenal Denison education. And you could see that they are test optional for their admission, which means you do not have to submit the ACT or SAT. There's no fees to apply for admission, so it's completely free to apply to the university, and there's no supplemental essays required either. So they have a simple application, and I'll touch on some of those things a little bit later on in the webinar as well. So once you narrow down your options and you research them further on the university's website, your goal is to select, like I mentioned before, about 6 to 10 institutions where you will actually submit an application. Now, we suggest that you apply to 2 what we call reach schools, so where you would be thrilled to attend, but it will actually be a challenge for you to get in. Now, keep in mind that if you're applying to ultra-competitive universities such as Yale, Stanford, MIT, Caltech, etc., these are reach schools for everyone that applies to them. We advise that you apply to about 3 to 4 what we call your match schools, where your profile and your application is roughly on par or better than their average applicant. And you could find what the average applicant is on most universities' website. They will list that information as well. And we advise that you apply to 2 likely admittance schools. So think of it as kind of your UCAS insurance choice university. And this is those are the schools that your application will be very competitive, and you might be like one of the top students that applies to those universities. Now, as I mentioned before, the best place to find the most up-to-date information is the actual university's website. You could see the profile of the average admitted applicant on there. You could also find more information on the different programs, the campus tours or virtual tours, what the student life looks like, what sports they have, what kind of student housing they have, what financial aid they offer for international students, what extracurricular activities they have as well. So it's important to check out that information to see if they meet those factors in that fit that we talked about. And also check out what resources they have for international students. A lot of universities have a lot of resources for international students on their website as well. They even have separate sections for them as well. We also encourage that you look at university social media channels. These can kind of give you a feel for what the university or the college is about. It kind of shows the university personality and also what they focus on as well. A lot of universities do life of a student on campus at that university, so you could kind of get a feel what a student, like a day in the life of a student on that university looks like. And also US universities want to hear from you. So try to reach out to them or call or email them and, kind of introduce yourself that you're interested in going there. Admission officers love to hear from students that are interested in going to that university. So I'm going to talk about a couple universities that you might not have heard of before. So this is Middlebury College, which is a small liberal arts college in Vermont, in the northeast of USA. So as you could see on the picture, it has cold winters, but it also has lovely summers. And Middlebury College actually has its own ski mountain. So, if you're looking to have 4 seasons in your life, maybe Middlebury is the college for you. It's very well known and focuses on languages and also things like climate change and climate science. It has top climate change professors. It's a small university with focus on undergraduate studies. And this means that there's no graduate students at the universities. So students have lots of access to their professors and they form relationships with them. Middlebury College is an example of a top university that you might not have heard of, and it's super selective to get into. So this is something to keep in mind when you're actually researching universities. Don't just look at universities that you know by name, but use that big feature search to explore and research universities that you might not have heard of before. So another example is Scripps College. Scripps College is located in Claremont, California. So it's just outside of Los Angeles. It's also a liberal arts college with top professors that teach there. It's a college for women or female identifying people only. And it's a great space for women to find their voice. They have great programs such as museum studies and conservation. And Scripps College is actually part of a consortium of 5 universities, which all share a campus. Those 5 universities are Scripps, Harvey Mudd, Pitzer, Claremont, McKenna, and Pomona University. And what it means is that students might go from those 5 universities might actually go to the same classes, and they might have classes with different professors from those 5 universities, but each institution in that consortium still has a very distinctive identity. So it's just another example of a university, that might be interesting to you, but you've never heard of. And we also have Vanderbilt University. So this is a much bigger university in middle of Nashville, Tennessee, which is the home of country music. It has a very vibrant campus feel. There's lots of culture and art things happening, but the campus is also very green, and it's actually very close to downtown Nashville. So Vanderbilt is known for its research hospitals, and it has a very big engineering program as well. It has a very big university feel, so the campus is a bit, it's busier. It has both undergraduate and postgraduate students that attend there. So the vibe is a bit different from the other two I mentioned. So keep that in mind. As you could see, I just showed you quickly 3 universities that are completely different from each other. And keep in mind that because each university is different, you will find one that's a good fit for you. So research to find one that actually has that fit, that, you know, when you look at it and when you look on their website, you're like, oh yeah, I could definitely go there. It definitely meets some of those factors that are important to me. So also just a quick note on the Ivy League. Now we hear this a lot in the UK, and when we hear about the Ivy League, the advisors at Education USA here in the UK, we kind of roll our eyes because it's kind of an unhelpful description of universities. So you might not be aware, but the Ivy League actually refers to a sports league between 8 of the oldest universities in the Northeast. And they formed this Ivy League because they could actually drive to play sports against each other back in the day when transportation wasn't as easily accessible. So the Ivy League is not equivalent to the Russell Group by any means. There's no becoming the Ivy League. Lots of universities that people think are Ivy League are not. So your MIT, Stanford, UCLA, they are not, and they will never be Ivy League universities. All universities in the Ivy League are private research universities, so they're very specific type of university. And if you are focusing on these 8 universities, you're limiting your opportunities to explore other institutions, such as liberal arts colleges or women's colleges, or even specialist institutions. The Ivy League universities are also extremely competitive. So some Ivy League schools have 1 to 2% admission rate, and they're very competitive. Now, this is compared to Oxford and Cambridge that have about 18 to 20% admission rate as well. So keep that in mind when you're looking at those universities. Now, other thing to think about is that the top 1% of universities in the UK is 1, maybe 2 universities. The top 1% of US universities would be over 40 different institutions. So just keep in mind these stats and be open-minded. You know, just because you haven't heard of a university doesn't mean it's not a good university. So don't limit yourself when you're doing that research as well. Okay, so funding your studies. Funding is one of the top things that we get asked about here at Education USA. And in this section, we are going to run through the costs you can anticipate, the different sources of funding that you could pull from, and the different strategies that you could implement to find funding. So what costs can you expect when applying and going to a US university? So the first one is the application expenses. And if a university requires admission test scores like the SATs or ACTs, those cost between $100 to $20 US. Now, each university will also have an application fee. Some universities offer waiver fees as well, so you might want to have a look if that's an option for you. But the application fees are between $50 and $100 per application. And this is kind of why we suggest to apply between 6 and 10 universities as well. You will also have a fee for your visa. Your embassy appointment, and something called SEVIS. And this is essentially the international students database that the Department of Homeland Security uses to keep track of international students. You also will have tuition and other fees. So as I mentioned before, universities in the US are not governed by anyone, and cost of tuition and fees can vary significantly because they are allowed to set their own fees and rates. Fees are mandatory, and they usually cover things like the student union, school athletics, and maybe even membership to the university gym. Now, it's something to note is that there's a funding misconception. So don't be put off by the sticker price, or what we call the cost of attendance. The cost of attendance in the US includes things like the tuition and fees, the room and board, personal expenses such as food, or if you go out, entertainment, entertainment fees like going to the cinema or maybe going out to eat. And sometimes those personal expenses even include things like your trips home. So things like cost of flights and tickets. Now, this is compared to the UK, which actually just lists the fees for their tuition. So it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at that sticker price or the cost of attendance in the US, that it does incorporate the different costs that you will have to pay while you're there. And another thing you will have to pay for is the cost of living and other expenses. So while cost of living may include room and board and some expenses, you still have to consider other living costs like eating out, buying clothes, entertainment, etc. And keep in mind that cost of living can vary widely depending on where your university is located. If you're renting a place off campus, it might be less expensive. Maybe you might need a car to get to campus. If your campus is located in a big city, it's going to be more expensive than if you live in a small town. So those are just the different variables that could affect the cost of living. Now, there is some good news, as there are a variety of funding opportunities available in the US. So it is possible to have a very affordable US university education. And many students from the UK are actually able to fully fund their studies without taking on any extra loans. Now, the key to this is to actually be willing to put in the time and effort to seek out and apply for funding. And I'm going to talk about the sources of funding on the next slide. So where does the money come from? We'll go more into each of these sources, but it's good to know that typically there are 4 different sources of funding for US study. So the first source is personal or family fund. US universities actually expect families to prioritize students' education and kind of start saving up for their university education from a very young age. And they're expected to invest into that education. So you might be expected to pay something to actually fund your education in the US. Now, the amount will vary university to university, and we'll go more in depth into this a bit later on. Another source of funding is US universities themselves. And that usually comes in 2 types of funding: need-based aid and merit-based scholarships, which I'll explain on the next slide. Now, this funding is going to vary university to university. So once again, if financial aid or funding is important to you, you need to look for and apply only to universities that offer that financial aid for international students. Another source of funding is external funding bodies, which I'll explain a bit later on. And there's also loans. However, we advise that loans be your final resort, just to keep something in mind that you cannot take the UK student loan to the US, and US-based loans require you to have a US citizen or permanent resident co-sign the loan. Now, you can take a UK third-party loan, but we caution you to be careful around high interest rates and payback terms as well. And if you have US citizenship, you could take out a loan and apply to federal loans by completing what's called a FAFSA form. Now, it might be that you have to pull from a combination of these different sources to fund your education, and I'll explain each of the sources a little bit more. So university funding is actually the ideal source of funding, as it doesn't have to be paid back. And as I mentioned, there are two types of university funding. The funding is likely to be awarded on the basis of either financial need. So this is based on your or your family's annual income, or academic merit. And this is based on your A-level marks and admission scores if required, or a niche criteria, or maybe even a combination of both. Now, the types of aids available in the US are what's called a need-based aid, and this is based on financial need. So the universities will calculate the expected family contribution, and they will compare that to the total cost of attendance, and then they try to meet the gap. Now, this is going to vary university to university and how much they could meet that gap. So some universities will meet 20% of the gap, some 80% of the gap, and some 100% of the gap. Now, the way this looks, let's just say a university, it costs $50,000 to go there. And the university expects your family to contribute $5,000. So there's another $45,000 that needs to be met. Now, if a university offers 100% financial aid, they will meet that difference. What that means is they will give you that $45,000 in order for you to be able to attend that university. Now, some universities might only offer 50% of financial aid, which means they only pay $22,500. So that means you'll still need to find funding for the other $22,500. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. Now, keep in mind that as you investigate the funding, make sure you watch for information about whether the university makes scholarships available as well to international students, because not all universities do. So some might offer just financial aid, some might offer scholarships, and some might have a combination of both. Now, if you're a top athlete and you compete either in a team or individual sport at national or international level, there might be sport scholarships that are available through the athletic recruitment process. And we have information about this on our website, as well as a webinar that we did about the athletic recruitment process for the US. So if this is you, have a look at it. I encourage it. Now, for more information on the university funding, make sure you check out each university's website. They'll give you all the information. And be proactive in finding this information. It's often what happens is that you apply for financial aid or scholarships at the same time as your admission application. And the process is usually quite straightforward and simple, and sometimes even integrated into the admission application. But you will find information about that on each university's website, because once again, it will vary institution by institution. So as an example of what this would look like, we'll go into the Rice University financial aid package. So Rice University is in Houston, Texas, and it's very well known for things like space and engineering, and it has strong links with NASA. It's also a private university, and here you could see the breakdown of the 2022-2023 cost of attendance. So you could see this gives you a breakdown of the tuition costs, other fees, room and board, books, and personal expenses as well. And you could see the total cost of attendance is just over $74,000. Now, they also mention that the average freshman aid, so freshman is a first-year student, so the aid package for a first-year student is $53,000, which means that the family picks up about $18,000, which is a bit more manageable. Now, this is what we say sticker price. This is what we mean, but think about the financial aid as it can make a difference. So as you could see, the sticker price for going to Rice University is $74,000, but actually the financial aid package lowers that cost down to $18,000. So when you're researching those universities, don't be shocked by that initial price. Make sure that you look at what financial aid they offer to students. Now, we are still on the Rice website, and we actually found a page called Merit-Based Scholarships. And you could see on here that they actually offer merit-based scholarships, and they actually talk about the past recipients, and they include students that are political and community service leaders, math and science competition winners, creative and performance artists, entrepreneur, and the scholar athletes and exceptional writers. And you could also see that all admitted freshman applicants are automatically considered for merit-based scholarships, so that no separate application forms or interviews are necessary. And the Office of Admission notifies scholarship winners at the time of admission to the university. So Rice University, you apply to the university as a first-year student or as a freshman, and you're automatically considered for a merit scholarship as well. And if you are accepted, they will actually let you know at the time of admission if you received the merit-based scholarship or not. Now, we're still on the Rice University website, and here there's a page with funding information specifically for international students. So you could note that international students are also considered for need-based aid, and 100% of demonstrated need is met with grant aid. So they use something called the CSS profile to gather information about a student's financial background to determine what their financial aid package will be. So it's important to check each university's website and if funding is available for international students. It breaks our hearts every year when someone reaches out to us and shares that they've gotten into their dream US university, but they didn't actually realize that that university doesn't offer any funding for an international student. There's not much we could do at that point. So once again, if funding is important in your consideration for going to study in the US, you definitely want to ensure there is funding at the university that you apply for international students. And be sure you check into this early at the beginning of your research process. When you start narrowing down your universities, that should be the first thing that you look for if they offer that aid for international students or scholarships for international students. So another source of funding, the external funding bodies. So these funding bodies may include a wide range of professional, charitable, or government organizations that are completely external to the university. So this is something you can think of as a niche scholarship. And most external funding bodies will have a specific criteria based on their mission. So for example, they might be looking to offer scholarships to students from a particular country of origin, maybe a particular ethnicity or religious faith, or maybe a particular interest in a particular field, maybe specific gender, or if you have a specific talent, they might be looking to give scholarships for young people with special talents, for example, women engineers or gifted musicians. So if you are unique in any sort of way, there is likely a funding body with scholarships out there for you. You just have to find it. An example is Morehead-Cain scholarship. So the Morehead-Cain scholarships looks for young people with leadership, character, scholarship, and physical vigor. and it provides a 4-year, fully funded educational experience for students of the highest caliber at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And there are thousands of funding bodies, so searching will require some time and dedication on your part to sift through those scholarship listings. And you also have to submit separate applications to each body. So for this reason, we actually encourage the students to first apply to for university funding opportunities and then for external funding afterwards. We also have a link on our website to scholarship search engines where you could kind of use filters again to search for different external funding scholarships. So we suggest that you kind of take 3 different approaches to your funding strategies. So you could explore universities with a lower cost of living. So same as in the UK, London will be more expensive than Lancaster. In the US, places like New York and California are going to be more expensive to live in than states like Ohio or Georgia or Michigan. Now, American universities will list on their website the full estimated cost of attendance, as you saw with Rice University. So that's tuition, fees, cost of living, and personal expenses. So you could kind of scope out places with the lower cost of living straight away. Now, another thing you could look at is to look at programs with lower tuition fees. Usually state schools will have lower tuition fees than private schools. So that might be something that you might want to look at as well. And another funding strategy is to kind of look at the different funding opportunities that are available to you. So look at the university funding, the external bodies, how much money can you afford to put in towards your education, or how much money can your family support you with? When looking at the funding strategy, consider all of those factors as well. Now, another way to kind of save money in going to the US is looking at community colleges. So community colleges in the US are increasingly popular choice as an alternative pathway that can help save students a lot of money. They generally award what's called an associate degree, and this is not a degree that's offered in the UK, but it's a degree that often has professional or vocational focus in the US. They also have programs that allow students to do what's called a 2+2 transfer pathway. So what that means is that a student starts their studies at a community college, and they do 2 years there. They receive an associate degree, and then they transfer to a 4-year university, receiving a bachelor's degree from that university. And many community colleges in the US have transfer agreements with big universities. So for example, you could see here, Los Angeles Valley College is a 2-year community college, and it actually has a partnership with universities like UCLA, University of Southern California, and also Cal Poly. So students could go to LA Valley College, they do their 2 years there, and then they transfer to one of those 3 universities. As an example, I actually attended a community college in Michigan. I had options to go to Michigan State and some other universities, but my local community college actually offered me a basketball scholarship to play there for 2 years. And to me, it was a no-brainer. I got 2 years of my education paid for. I lived at home, which meant that I could have a part-time job and I would save on traveling as well. And I also got to experience, college campus life. Community colleges still have campuses, they still have sports, they still have extracurricular clubs, and you get to save a lot of money whilst doing the first 2 years of your education. So they are a much less expensive option than a typical 4-year university. And you could literally save thousands of dollars by paying a significantly lower tuition to a community college for 2 out of the 4 years whilst you're there. They also have smaller class sizes, which could be valuable for the introductory classes during your first 2 years, and you also get more contact with professors. The application process to community colleges is also less rigorous, and the entry requirements are a bit lower than a 4-year university. So students with a BTech or OCR or other similar qualifications, they may apply to community colleges. And many community colleges don't require any admission exam scores to be admitted. You could also find more information, including a community college webinar on our website. It kind of goes into a bit more detail about what community colleges look like. So what are some funding tips for going to the US? So since applying for funding is simultaneous to the admission process, you kind of want to begin your search for funding early. So it will take time to research the funding at the schools where you want to apply to, and also it will take time to search for external scholarships as well. The best place for funding resources are the university website and the online scholarship searches that we have listed on our website as well. So those will be your best sources to kind of look for that funding. And make sure that you look for both financial aid pages and also information for international students as well when you're looking at what funding is available. Also consider having a funding strategy. So to fully fund your studies, you may need a combination of all the different types of funding that we've discussed. So things like family funds, university funds, external funding bodies, or maybe even a small loan. And make sure that you investigate each type of funding that's available for you. And just remember, it's also important to remain flexible in this choosing process. Don't just apply where thousands of other UK students apply, but apply where you will be competitive. So this example of the fish bowls is great. You might apply to a big university where a lot of UK students apply to and kind of be a small fish in a big pond with lots of similar fish, lots of similar students. Or you might find a university that actually has a very low percentage of international students or even small percentage of UK students that apply to that university. And you'll be a big fish in a small pond, and your application will stand out because you'll be the only student that actually applies to that university, and you'll be very competitive, and your application will stand out to admission officers. So that's just something to keep in mind. Also, universities that take on a lot of international students, sometimes they have limited funding as well, and those that might have a limited amount of international students might actually offer you bigger funding. So just a tip, make sure you stay open-minded and do that research, see what each university has on offer for you. Okay, so how do we go, now that you've narrowed down your choices, how do you go about completing an application? So US universities look for a couple different things on the application. The first thing is your academics, which are measured by your results. So that would be things like your GCSEs and A-levels or equivalent, and also admission test scores if they are required. Now, you could check each university's website to see if they require any admission test scores. And like I mentioned before, you could also find the average applicant profile on each website as well. Now, keep in mind that the academic achievement alone will not actually guarantee you an entrance to a competitive US university. The application process is actually much more holistic than here in the UK. So US universities look for something called the academic fit. And these are reasons for pursuing a degree at their institution. They want to know how you going there will help you, or how they can help you towards your goals. So for example, they want to know if you go to New York, why you chose NYU over Columbia. Did NYU offer a particular program or maybe a particular campus activity that Columbia didn't? Or is the mission of NYU something that you feel strongly about? They want to know how they could be there to support you. So it's very important to put that across in your application. They also have a big focus on your extracurricular activities. This doesn't mean that you have to do everything under the sun, but it's important to highlight what you are involved in outside of the school. Do you volunteer at a local community center every week? Did you maybe start a club at your school? Are you a high-level athlete that competes nationally or internationally? Maybe you have a part-time job whilst going to college. Those are all important factors and extracurriculars that the US will focus on. So it's kind of highlighting what you are involved in, outside of the school. They also look at your personal attributes. So as I mentioned before, the US admission process is very holistic, and they're always looking to diversify their campuses and their classrooms. They want to know who you are as a person. They want to find out what your interests are, in the academic field of your choice, why you chose that interest or why you chose that academic field. They want to find out what your character is, if you have any leadership abilities, basically what you are about, who you are as a person. So those are all important factors that the US admission process or admission officers look for in your application. So what are the application components? So unlike the UK, as I mentioned before, you apply to each university individually rather than a centralized body like UCAS. And students can apply to as many universities as they like, but due to the time and costs, like I mentioned before, we recommend that you apply to about 6 to 10 schools during this process. Now, some US universities use what's called the common application. So around 900 universities use this system. And this is a system to help streamline the demographic aspect of the application. So this is not like UCAS in that you will still have to tailor all of your applications to each university, and you will still have to answer the different questions that each university asks of you, and you will also have to submit supplementary questions that are asked of you for each university. But this is a system where you could basically put all your demographic aspects and information, and also information about your school history. Now, keep in mind that there is no standard process for applications. There's no set deadlines either, and the requirements will vary by university, but all the information can be found on each university's website. Most applications will follow a similar format, so you might be able to reuse or adapt some of the material you prepare for each university. And most applications will include an application form with basic demographics. So that might be through the Common App, or they might have an individual application form. They might have admission test scores if required. They will include things like a transcript. You will also have to submit essays, 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. And finally, you will have to pay an application fee, which is about $50 to $100 per application. So to go a bit deeper into those components, the admission tests, because in the US, there is no national curriculum at secondary school level, the admission tests are used to evaluate applicants from diverse areas and the different schools across the US. Now, since COVID, a lot of universities are test optional. What that means is that they do not require you to submit any admission tests, but make sure that you check on each university's website if that is something that they require for your admission year. Now, we encourage students to take your admission test in the summer after year 12 or the autumn of year 13 before the half-term holiday. So that's about 10 to 12 months before enrollment. And most universities might require the ACT or the SAT. But as I mentioned before, there's an increasing amount of universities that are going test optional. So double check their website for that information. Now, how do you choose between the SAT and the ACT? So one isn't considered better than the other. They're just kind of different style of tests. So you kind of have to pick the best fit for you. And the best way to decide this is to take a timed full-length practice test of each type. So there are many free ones that you could find online. And the content and the style of the SAT and the ACT are very similar. But it's the factors like how you handle the time pressure and what type of questions you will be asked and you find most challenging that might help you determine which test is a better fit for you and which one you should take if that is something that is required of you. So for an example, I actually took both the SAT and the ACT, and I found the way that the questions were asked and formed in one of the tests easier for me to understand, and just I preferred it much more to the other one, so I chose to take one over the other. And like I said, best thing to do is just to take a free practice test that you could take online or find online. So something that you will have to submit as well with your application is a transcript. Now, a transcript is a list of your academic qualifications and marks covering years 10 through 13 in England and Wales, years 11 through 14 in Northern Ireland, and S3 to S6 in Scotland. And a transcript is generated by your school, but you might have to provide your school with information about what they need to include in a transcript. So they might have to include things like the years you attended, your GCSE scores, your predicted A-levels, etc. Also keep in mind that there's no direct conversion between UK and US marks. So make sure that your marks are reported in the British system. Most US universities understand the British system anyway, so there's no need to convert that. And the transcript, as I mentioned before, is typically submitted online by the school. Now, you might also provide something called a school report. And this just contains information about the school itself, just for context, for the admission officers to kind of see what your school's about, how big it is, how many students go there, etc. Now, there's templates available for both on our website as well. So you could either download them yourself or send your teachers or whoever will be doing that for you to our website. We recommend you download it and give it to them. Now, as we mentioned before, you will likely be required to gather 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. And these letters should be a marketing tool for you as an applicant. Referees will have particular areas they could speak to about you, but you might want to direct referees to write about specific things about yourself. So maybe your ability to succeed at a particular university, maybe you want them to talk about your past academic performance or observations that they made about your performance in the classroom or on a specific assignment. Or maybe you want, some school awards, or you have great writing and critical thinking skills. Or maybe you have a lot of work experience. So you might want to point your referees in the direction that you'd like them to write about you. they might want to write about your ability to positively contribute to the university that you'll be attending, or maybe even the campus life, or how you will help diversify the campus and the university. If you have great leadership abilities, or you have great involvement in the school and community, that's something that they might want to mention in your reference letter. Now, it's important that you ask someone who knows you well, so both in and out of the classroom. Each university might also provide you some loose guidelines for selecting your referees. For example, they might ask for one letter from a counselor, or maybe one letter from a teacher, but it's generally your responsibility to choose and liaise with your referees. And you might want to consider meeting with your referee to discuss the letter, just to help them write the best letter that they can. And you may wish to schedule a meeting to discuss your reasons for actually doing an undergraduate degree in the US, what your interests in the particular university that you selected are. Maybe you have some future goals that you want to talk to them about, or maybe they might not know about some of your academic achievements or your extracurricular involvement. So it might be important to actually meet with them beforehand so you could talk about all those things. Make sure also that your referee is aware of deadlines and the paperwork they need to complete. So it's your responsibility to inform them of the deadlines and all the paperwork required. And encourage the referees to avoid being restrained and too modest. So most American referees actually tend to write in a very enthusiastic tone, and they use very positive and descriptive language. And they discuss the applicant both in and out of the classroom, and they talk about their personality as well. So keep in mind what will be written about your American counterparts when preparing your referee to write the letters. Encourage them to kind of refrain from using restrained or modest language. Make sure they boast about you. This is their chance to tell US admission officers how great you are as a person and as a student. Now, another thing you might have to supply is essays. So this is one of the most important part of the application process for undergraduate study in the US. Excuse me. Strong essays could actually set you apart from other applicants. So this gives you an opportunity to showcase yourself to university. It gives you a chance to show them who you are as a person. The essays are not your UCAS personal statement. They're more than, rather than submitting kind of an explanation of your interests and your achievements in a particular field like you would through UCAS, you will actually be asked to respond to between 1 to 3 essay questions on the university application. Now, each university will actually set its own questions, as well as the actual length for your response. On the Common App system, there will always be one essay question that goes out to all the universities you apply to. And then you will find that you will have supplemental questions, which are unique to each institution you apply to. So some of the essays on the Common App might be things like reflect on the time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? Or maybe you might be asked something like describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose all track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? So it's very unlikely that you will be able to compose one essay that will actually sufficiently answer questions posed by multiple universities, but you might be able to reuse some of the elements. Just make sure that you take out universities' names before you send it, and make sure you have someone check it for you, so you don't send, I don't know, UCLA an essay and it actually mentions NYU in it. So what are some of the writing tips for the essays? So make sure that you actually address the question fully and you answer it fully. Use clear and concise language and avoid using vague or empty statements or cliches. US admission officers just they don't like to see that. They want to find out who you are through answering those essay questions. And as I mentioned, if you reuse any essay, make sure that you're careful to submit the correct essay to the correct university as well, and double check that all references within that essays are to the correct university. Make sure that you proofread the essay, and also ask others to proofread your essay and offer their feedback. You know, they might give you some great feedback that you could tweak the essay to make it even better. The most important tip, be yourself. So don't give the admission officers the answer that you think that they want to hear from you, but actually give them the truth. You know, make sure that you sell yourself and you show them that what sets you apart from other students that are applying to that university. This is your chance to let your personality come through in the essay. There's also more tips on our website and links to some examples for successful essays and tips of how to write your essays better as well. So I would suggest that you check those out. So what are some other opportunities in the US? There are a few different opportunities if you decide to do a full degree, if you decide that a full degree in the US is not for you. So you could go to the US while at a UK university through university exchange programs. Many UK universities have established exchange programs with US universities, or they have a US-based study abroad program. So for example, University of Manchester has partnership with over 18 universities in the US. And logistically, this is simpler as your university will help you arrange everything. And it's usually a lot more affordable as well. How that looks is that you go, your whole degree will last 4 years, and in your third year, you actually go to the US, and then you come back to your home university and you finish your 4th year and you receive your bachelor's degree. You may also have a variety of summer institutes that the university offers, or the study of the US institutes. This is usually for student leaders that are, and these are intensive short-term academic programs, and their purpose is to provide groups of undergraduate student leaders with a deeper understanding of the United States, and simultaneously it enhances their leadership skills whilst they're there on the program. And obviously, if you already love America, you could spend your whole degree studying there. An American studies program often incorporate a year in the US as well. There's also things like internship and summer work through BUNEC or Camp America that a lot of students take part in. And another option is actually to do your postgraduate study in the US instead. We also have Fulbright awards for this and advice on our website on the postgraduate level page. So what are some of the ways that we can help? So in partnership with the social mobility program in the UK called the Sutton Trust program, we offer a 2-year program for high achieving year 12 students from low income families, and they get an opportunity to visit the US and visit US universities in the first year of the program. And then also we support them to apply for undergraduate study in the US. This is a free program for students to attend. The application will open up again in November. So if in November you're a year 12 student from a low income family, you could apply for the program. We usually notify students if they were accepted at the end of January, early February, and then we go with them to America in July of that year, and then they have another year to kind of where we support them in applying for undergraduate study in the US. Another way we could help is visiting our website for advice, guides, and schedule of different events. So under going to the US, you could find undergraduate guides with information on choosing funding and applying to US universities. We also offer one-to-one video appointments with an advisor on Zoom, and we take questions by email. So our email address is advising@fulbright.org.uk, and that's Fulbright with one L, but I'll pop that in the chat as well. And you could reach out to us through email or by booking an appointment if you have questions as you go along through this process at any time. We also have events about studying in the US online and in person, so such as this webinar, and you could find all our events on our events page on our website. And we have US College Day every year in September. The event is held in London. It's completely free to attend. We have over 120 universities and exhibitors from the US come and attend the event. The universities are represented by international admissions officers. So these are the people that, if you apply to that university, they will actually read your application. It's completely free for students, parents, and teachers to attend. You just have to register for a time slot, and the registration opens in late summer this year. The event is on the 23rd and 24th of September this year, and you can find more information about it on our website, as well as sign up to be notified when registration opens as well. And with that, I'm going to open up the Q&A, and just a reminder that the recording will be sent around if you need to head off as well. So I'm going to start answering some of the questions. Yes, the recording will be available to you. I'll probably send it on Friday to everyone that has registered for this webinar, so you could have a look through it again. So question about medicine. So although you cannot study medicine at an undergraduate level, can you study dentistry as an undergraduate level? So the simple question is, we do not recommend studying any sort of medical field in the undergraduate level in the US, because there's very little, if no funding available for international students. And also, just because you get a degree in that particular field does not mean that you could practice it here in the UK when you return. And also, it doesn't mean that you could practice it in the US when you finish your studies. Okay, so we have a question about how would you recommend preparing for the SAT or the ACT? So the first thing I would do is look at both exams online and take the sample ones that are free to take under time circumstances. There are a lot of free there's a lot of free information and resources that could help you prepare for either exam. That's free to access. It kind of gives you information on how the questions are asked, how you would go about answering them. It gives you like tips on how to take each of the exams. So my recommendation is to first kind of look at what the two tests look like, but just keep in mind that universities that you apply to might not actually ask for you to submit those exams. Okay, so we have a question about extracurriculars, and it's what type of extracurriculars would be considered competitive. So competitive is a bit, I would say it's the wrong word to use. What they're looking for is strong extracurriculars. So for example, if I'm a volunteer at a local community center and I help young children, I don't know, play sport after school, and I do this once a week, after school at the local community center. That shows that I have skills in leadership, in working with different children. It shows that I have the initiative to do something different from my other students. Another good curricular would be if you're working a part-time job. It's just more on explaining what you do and how it affects the larger community, or what effect it has beyond what you do in school. So someone has a question about the timeline. So the question is, can you explain the timelines again, when in year 12 to start the process and when to put together the application? So you could find the timeline, the exact breakdown on our website, but just to give a quick overview, you would kind of start researching universities in year 12, and in the summer, when you finish year 12, so between year 12 and 13, you want to have the universities narrowed down to about 20 universities that you will then start researching even more into. And at the start of your year 13, you want to start applying to universities, the 6 to 10 universities that are a great fit for you. But you could find the timeline. Once again, it's on our website. It lists exactly what we recommend a student to do. Okay, so there's a specific question about sports scholarships. What I recommend to do is go on our website. In the funding undergraduate studies, there's a section about athletic scholarships, and there's 2 great webinars, one from NCAA and one from a coach in the United States that explains the whole process of athletic scholarships and sports scholarships in the US and how they work. Okay, great. Those are all the questions we have for tonight. I'd like to thank you for joining me this evening. I hope you gained some valuable information through this webinar. And as mentioned before, this will be available and sent out to you in the next few days. Thank you very much and have a good evening.